Welcome to Law at the Margins Law plus Liberation series. Today we're here with our guest, Chelsea Higgs Wise, who is the Executive Director of Marijuana Justice. Wise is a mother, social worker, and community organizer committed to unearthing Black history and advancing racial and economic justice. Her work is deeply informed by personal experience, including her own father's incarceration for nonviolent drug offenses. She believes that we are the work and we have the answers. Thank you so much, Chelsea, for joining us today. I want to start first with your own personal trajectory to finding and leading marijuana justice.
Thank you so much for having me. I am reporting live from Monacan territory, otherwise known as Richmond, Virginia area. And I was born and raised in this area around Richmond and Chesterfield, Virginia. I was born to a school of educational instructors, school teachers, particularly in Richmond Public Schools. So I really got to grow up with folks that were very much interested in community, interested in learning from each other and lifting folks up. My aunties have been in the movement for a long time. I remember sitting at the ankles of storytellers and legacy organizers here in Virginia. And that led me to becoming a social worker. I graduated and got my master's in social work and practiced social work for about 10 years. Life happens, and I was doing clinical work. I got to work with many people as individuals. Um, Helping them navigate certain systems so that they can better survive. And I had my own personal transformation of when my marriage ended and I started co-parenting and I had this extra time and I really wanted to make sure I was doing something meaningful to me by giving back to my community. So that's the organizing story. I started volunteering, started showing up, participating in many campaigns, and even became a media justice provider and contributor through a local radio show that some other community organizers and I had. And then in 2019, even prior to 2020, here in Virginia, there was a yearbook photo that came out of our then governor. And on that yearbook page, it had his name at the top, and in that picture, it had somebody in blackface and somebody in a full KKK robe.
Mm.
This sparked a lot of controversy, and it sparked conversation of how are we actually not just apologizing with our words, but apologizing to make the world better and what power he has to do that. And that's really what pushed me into looking at other organizations like Drug Policy Alliance across the nation and saw that people were doing these things with legalization, with equity and repair. And I had never heard of legalization in that way before. It was kind of just like, I want my marijuana and I want it now. But to hear that there was a way that we could contribute to the decriminalizing of people, how we can contribute to getting people free, how we can contribute to the decreasing of family policing, really stripping away the drug war, that is what was attractive to me and a lot of folks. And so that is what pushed us to form Marijuana Justice. And that is a reaction, a call to the community, because in the larger sense, we were saying, what is the justice that we can demand for right now? And in Virginia at the time, there were 20,000 people a year being arrested for marijuana. And at that time, we also knew that Black people were being arrested 4 times the rate of white folks, of that 20,000 people a year. And so by changing the laws, we were really going after a way to get people free, to stop the surveillance, and to really, again, strip away with the drug war. So that's how we got here. We had a great win in 2021 with that governor. We held his feet to the fire, and that is how Virginia became the first state in the U.S. South to repeal the prohibition of small amounts of marijuana and stop the continued harm of those arrests.
So I want to go back so that listeners can really understand your trajectory step by step. You use in your organization the word marijuana justice. Can you share a little bit about that formulation, that name? What is it? What does it encompass? It seems that it goes beyond just legalization, and you've already won that to some extent. Can you share a little bit about what does defining that term for you?
Naming our organization Marijuana Justice was very intentional. And we knew that the word marijuana was criminalized, particularly to target people that use the word marijuana. And that was Spanish speaking people. That's what the word means, is marijuana in Spanish. And this is a target for Latino folks. It was also a target for Black communities that were consuming, particularly a lot of Black artists that used it for their types of medicine and creativity. A lot of root workers as well, that this has always been a medicine. So the reason why in the United States we don't just use the word cannabis is because we want to actually criminalize the word from the start coming out of our lips by saying, oh, well, cannabis is something else. Marijuana is now actually what is illegal. And then to put the word justice beside it means that we have to look beyond just access to the plant, because even naming the prohibition went beyond the name. They were very formulated to name this plant something that they could tie to what people were afraid of, and same immigrant fear narrative that we're hearing today, very honestly. And so we knew that this had to go just beyond the legalization. That's why the justice is there. We know that marijuana prohibition has impacted people beyond just possessing it. It's separated families. People have spent years in prison from just trying to take care of their family from the underground economy. And we don't call that the black market, right? That's language that we can also see has been racialized to demonize what people are doing in this informal economy that particularly black people, brown people have always been using to take care of our families. So we knew that marijuana justice was going to go beyond.
I think that's really powerful because I think there is this sort of use of the word cannabis. I'm based in New York, and I think the naming of it is explicit about the racial and economic control. Do you want to elaborate on that point of how criminalization of marijuana is part of a historical and systematic racial and economic control in the United States?
Absolutely. In the United States, marijuana has always been the gateway to criminalization. And that is what we've seen in laws since the early 40s. And it was targeted to people growing this that looked like me, that had brown faces, that were close to the border. And then we know in the 70s, particularly, we had a president's advisor say very directly that they knew what they were doing by prohibiting marijuana use in order to target Black people, Latinos, and anti-war people. We know that that is what their entire plan for criminalizing people in proximity to this plant was about. And so this was never about the danger of a plant, particularly even in the 1970s. Nixon's own commission came back and said this plant should not be criminalized under criminal code. He ignored that and he went forward in order to achieve his mission of continuing to target people already on the margins.
And how does marijuana criminalization intersect with global drug policy and trade? Um, does that come into your work or as part of your framework?
And marijuana justice, we also talk about drug war reparations. And this is really when we talk about the global impact of the drug war. And yes, folks around here have conversations and thoughts about US reparations, but we also know that we as the United States owe reparations to other countries for being one of the largest cartels in the world. Yes, the United States is one of the largest cartels in the world. And so we have to understand how that has attributed to particularly young women disappearing across the globe, as they are the folks that are being trafficked along with the drugs. They are seen as disposable. And we've seen that same dynamic happen here. And so it is not lost upon us that there is harm right here in the United States, but the global impact of the US drug war has also been something critical that we can't take our eye off of.
This is a good segue into your advocacy tools now that we have a framework and analysis. What strategies or approaches do you use in your advocacy work?
So we really use community organizing and media justice. We are constantly putting out our own narratives. We are often also writing our own reports. And we are gathering community voices of what has been heard because many people that are making these decisions have actually never talked to somebody that's been impacted before. And they don't even know the continued harm that's happening, even in Virginia. So we are constantly lifting the data that we know is to be true from stories, but also from the data that we can collect. So we are our own storytellers. We write our own proposals. And we also organize our own experts from having a degree or just having experience here.
I'm really happy you said that. One of the principles of law at the margins is precisely that, is to amplify individuals with lived experience as experts of law and policy issues. I want to talk a little bit about storytelling. I think this is an area that not all organizations incorporate into their advocacy. Just if someone wants to incorporate that into their work, what are some lessons or advice that you would give to integrate storytelling and narratives, media justice into their organizing work?
Integrating storytelling in our work is so important, and it's critical that we also understand why we're doing it and who is our audience. Unfortunately, I have seen many times our stories being put in front of decision makers and decision makers only to pull at their heartstrings. And shifting hearts and minds might be a strategy, but the way that we use storytelling is actually to speak truth to our power and to with our community. It's to engage our community so that they can hear themselves. And so when I would give advice for storytelling and doing this type of media justice, is that I would say that we have to really make sure that our stories are reflecting our community. I would also say that we have to be able to build our audience. We have to be able to build our audience because many times the people that are showing up to these things aren't necessarily the folks that we want to be working with.
Mm.
And we have to make sure our stories are shown in these communities and our people have access to these stories. Um, just some other tidbits I would say is that when people are sharing their stories, they are the experts. And so if you have money for experts, you have money for experts. And to pay people and provide resources for people for providing their stories that, especially if you're recording them, provide some dignity and to that support system. I think it's really critical that you also allow people to be editors of their story. So they tell you that one time, please don't put that out without also consulting with them and making sure their likeness is reflected in the way that is meant to be. And just continue to make it accessible. So bring more stories on, bring more people, and pass the mic because somebody might actually be able to tell a story to your audience even better than you. Well, tell a story to your audience even better than the original messenger. So even as marijuana justice as a platform might not be the messenger at that moment, we're more than happy to pass the mic for people to speak up, to tell their own story and lift the overall mission.
You mentioned earlier a success in terms of at the state level of decriminalizing marijuana. Just want to go back to that advocacy work and a little bit about that work and what the organization has done since in terms of making law and policy changes.
Sure. In 2020, Virginia decided to decrim marijuana, but unfortunately, decrim actually continues to have a criminal penalty or civil penalty. We didn't believe that civil penalties were minor penalties at all. We know that those can lead to many other collateral consequences, losing their home, losing their job. And these are livelihood survival tools that have to be here in our certain society. And so we decided to say, yes, if we're going to legalize it, we did not actually need the market. That's not what we were aiming for. We were aiming for stopping the harm. And so we had to tell stories of people being surveilled. We had to tell stories of people being stopped and searched. And so we didn't just legalize possession, we also were able to work with public defenders here in Virginia to remove the smell of marijuana as a reason to stop, search, and seize here in Virginia. And that was a tool that was used by policing up and down. And that's something that we could never prove. But for whatever reason, every arrest, particularly with certain officers right here in Richmond, always started with, well, I smelled marijuana. So
Mhm.
we were able to get that repealed. You are able to possess up to 1 ounce on your person. You're able to share. In Virginia, you're able to grow 4 plants, and so you have access to your own medicine. And we have started the procedure of sealing these records, particularly for the lower offenses. And so that's what we were able to do in 2021. And so we took that number from 20,000 a year down to about 1,200. That is an incredible decrease, but we want the number to be zero. And we want it to go beyond just simple possession, which is what we've been working on since 2021. And the conditions in our political environment have not been to where they're willing to do this with their power, but we have continued to defend the repealing of the smell as a reason to stop, search, and seize. We've been defending even more criminalization with a very harsh conservative governor. And we've been working with other organizations to defend rights of people, including immigrant populations, because marijuana has been the number 2 reason for deportation for years here in the United States. And our Virginia legality does not mean that those with undocumented status or mixed documented status are safe. It does not apply to people that are not citizens. And so we're continuing to work on continuing to repeal that type of criminalization. We're also continuing to work with families and people that use marijuana legally now. In Virginia, it is still possible for parents to lose custody or visitation because of using legal marijuana. It's also authority upon a CPS to remove just because of illegal prescription use for possibly opioid use disorder. And these are legal drugs now that people are using for treatments, for medicines, and for whatever reason, our family policing system is still using it as a way to be in the home and possibly even separate families, which is something that we don't want and is part of the drug war. We also are now working on, now that it is legal, this is the time to let some folks free. This is the time to look at the sentences of people that have marijuana charges, whether they're still incarcerated in prison and jails and on probation. Many people are violated on probation because of marijuana. And so we are now looking to have what we're calling our resentencing bill. And that resentencing bill allows people to have the relief and a second look in front of a judge. And the judge is told that they are then to consider that marijuana is legal and to resentence someone that could also lead to their release or off of community surveillance altogether. And now we are also working on a proposal to move forward the decriminalization of youth 18 and under. Many people in Virginia don't know that in 2020, when we decriminalized, we actually increased the penalties on young people. So young people are being classified as delinquents in a way that removes resources from them to get back on a more positive path, and they're just stuck in the DOJ system. And so we're working with youth lawyers, you're working with young people directly on getting a survey out and telling our decision makers that our children deserve care, not court. And so hoping to really actually decrim young people. And if they're caught with marijuana or in proximity, then let's look at warnings. Let's look with notes to the parents and meetings with the parents, not mandated treatment off right either. Mandated treatment, we know, is something that's also been used indiscriminately and as a way to police and incarcerate young people and adults for a long time. And I know that as a social worker as well.
And it's extraordinary at the breadth and also the holistic work that you do. I want to, as we're winding down our time, focus a little bit on the perspective. What do you see as the eventual goal of marijuana justice? Does there a reparative aspect to your work? The money that went into this drug war, can they be reinvested or redirected towards communities that have been harmed? Sort of a repair reparations framework. So just kind of thinking about like, what do you see as the future where, Chelsea can say, okay, we
Yeah.
we can put down the mantle and, we can relax a bit. Yes.
Right, right. I do want to say that we work in conditions that we will say that more work will have to be done, even if it's not under the label of marijuana justice, and that work will continue. But what we are here for is to continue to repeal the prohibition, and so we're looking to even expand what is legal. We are looking to ensure that a clean slate bill is done there to expunge and record seal so that people are not stopped from having jobs or houses or education. So, this record sealing expungement piece that we have here in Virginia. And then we are also, reparations is part of our work in reinvestment. This reparation and reinvestment is absolutely part of our work. And so we have dedicated a cause and a proposal to push and demand for at least 60% of all of the revenue of adult use cannabis that is sold in Virginia to be put into a cannabis equity reinvestment fund. That fund is already set up. It is already part of the law that passed in 2021. And so, right now in Virginia, we still don't have adult use sales, but I do predict that we will very soon after this election, which means money will be coming. And where that money goes and how that money is distributed, it is very important to our cause. And so we not only have a community reinvestment fund, we also have a cannabis equity business fund to support small businesses in this cannabis role to provide to their own communities. And these community reinvestment pieces can go to community grants, it can go to guaranteed income, it can go to many of the pieces across Virginia, particularly in the areas and to individuals that had the disproportionate arrest rates or themselves people with past marijuana crimes. When I look at a Virginia, I want to see if we have to sell this under capitalism. I want the people that were also harmed to hold licenses to sell legally and to make a lifeline off of that, just as we had before. And that is also part of our proposal. So we have an equity clause that would say people with past offenses, family members that have past offenses, you can help qualify to be part of the industry now. But we are really, really focused on ensuring that this revenue is equitably reinvested. And we made the fund very specifically to not go back into the general fund of Virginia, but to go to a dedicated fund space so that there can be transparency and also people power to push where that money goes.
You mentioned the new governor, and you may not, as a C3, be able to comment on sort of elections or in that, but just what do you sort of see as the environment politically for some of your proposals, for organizations' proposals to come to fruition? Do you think that it's a welcoming, semi-welcoming? Do you see possibilities of some of this work sort of moving forward under new leadership, at least political leadership because leadership is beyond just electoral.
In our new political environment with our electeds, I can see that there is more hope for our proposals. I will say that. I will say that we have people now that we feel could be pushed with our voices. Virginia has one of the largest quote unquote Democrat majorities in the last 40 years. And many of them, I do believe, would be anti-monopoly and for repair and really for our causes of protecting individuals and families. Um, I'm not going to use the word welcoming because
Fair.
I've been around too long. And this is going to take the people's push and organizing to get this done in the way that we want. But I am very hopeful that the last 4 years haven't been in vain while we've been under a leadership in the governor's office that said absolutely not. Our new governor, Abigail Spanberger, has said that she believes in legalization. And so now it's not just legalize it, but let's hope that we legalize it right.
Um, Folks talk about abolition in the context of criminal legal system. Does that figure in your work as part of your vision in your work around marijuana justice?
Abolition is the root of my knowledge and my foundation of how we show up in this work. Marijuana and cannabis can often have this exceptionalism across the drug war. And that is something that we heavily push back on. And if we are not creating an open door for prohibition of all drugs, then we are not doing this in a way that is truly transformative and with these types of abolitionist values. I also believe in telling the truth that legalization means that there is still more enforcement. It's only legal for certain people. The police are never going to stop enforcing marijuana. And so we have to create our own systems to keep us safe. I want to make sure that our systems are repealing the criminalization at every point. And that's why we don't just look at possession. We look at the family, we look at CPS, we look at the school systems, everywhere that we've been able to criminalize. Can we use this opportunity to repeal more of this criminalization and interrupt it truly to also create a gateway for more people that use drugs and different types of substances to also walk into a world where they're not stigmatized in the way that cannabis is now moving towards. And so that's why I really say that our work will always continue because even if we free marijuana and free our people around it, we still have so much work to do to not just end the drug war, but to end the policing system as we know that continues to be a larger strategy against our people.
I'm just very briefly, law schools and legal practitioners, how could they contribute to the vision that you've laid out of liberation and particularly for marijuana justice?
Law schools and other folks that are in this educational spaces, particularly for policy, I'm noticing that in higher ed spaces, we're putting cannabis and legalization under criminal justice enforcement. And it doesn't necessarily always have to be that way because then we come at it from a criminal code point of view. And we have to really look at this as a way to lead folks more towards a public health frame. So I would love to see this showing up in public health spaces and youth spaces, and have lawyers that don't just come from a defense background or prosecution background, but to also pay attention and write the reports, look at the data, do the projects, volunteer your time. We've had so many lawyers that volunteer their time and spaces to us, and we really thank them for that. And we could not do this without their work. But I'm really asking folks to, particularly with a policy mind, to be innovative, particularly if you're still in school, because everywhere across the country is just copying and pasting terrible laws that are not allowing us to imagine a different way to go forward in policy. So talk to your banking friends, talk to your antitrust friends, talk to your family, domestic law friends, talk to other people for a truly intersectional way, because only looking at it from an enforcement lens is never going to get us free.
Great. So my last question that I ask all interviewees, this is Law Plus Liberation. It's a public education series. What does liberation mean to you, from your vantage point, from your experience, from your work? What's your definition of liberation?
My definition of liberation really goes back to self-determination. And that's what I bring to this work every single day, of making sure that the individuals and the communities that we're working with are deciding what their futures look like, and that we're not moving without them. Liberation looks like that we are continuing to take care of ourselves and free ourselves. We understand that this is generational work. And so liberation for us means that laying a path and leaving the clues for the next generation to pick it up, and to be good elders. That is also what my liberation vision looks like, is that we have people that have been here before and doing this work that are continuing to support us, and we continue to support the young people.
Thank you so much, for your time. I think this has been a phenomenal, just in terms of shifting our mindset around, this issue, and holistically, and also just from your, framework, and the kind of the breadth of the work is pretty extraordinary. So thank you so much, Chelsea.
Thank you all for having me.